So you're wanting to get a ball python, but you don't know whether to get a baby or an adult, or a male or a female? Let's talk about it. As we continue with this series of what you should get or what the differences are between different genders and ages, this video is about, like I already said, ball pythons. So first we're going to talk about the age differences, and then we're going to talk about the sex differences. And it's a little bit less different than bearded dragons, so it's all going to be in one video versus with bearded dragons how to do it in two separate videos. But first genders. No, I said first it was going to be age. So age. What's the difference between a baby ball python and an adult ball python? Well, technically there's not much difference. The only thing I could say that there is a slight difference is a feeding schedule can change as they get older. Now, depending on depending on who you listen to, I feed my ball python babies from the egg. I feed them every 5 days until they get about 150 grams or so. After that, they kind of just eat once a week. And typically, if you're depending on who you listen to, like I said, typically if you go, the closer you get to adulthood, it's every 2 weeks, and some people even do once a month. For pet ball pythons, that's not going to be for breeder ball pythons, because breeder ball pythons do need to eat a little bit more, especially females. They need to eat a little bit more than if they were just a pet. So that's really the only difference I can say. Obviously, the enclosure or size of the tub that you're using is going to be different as well. If you want to start with a smaller enclosure and then upgrade, but if you just start with a larger enclosure, the only thing I have to say is with baby ball pythons, you're going to have to add a lot more stuff so they don't feel like they're kind of in like a wide open area. So you're going to have to add a lot more stuff, make them feel a little bit cramped. So whether you do that with a bunch of hides, a bunch of decor, whatever it is, branches, leaves, whatever you got to do, just know that that's typically the way for a baby ball python to live. As for adults, since they take up more space, they're going to be crowded a lot faster. So less hides, less stuff is going to be needed. But essentially the same size enclosure could be bought for a baby if you do put all of that stuff inside of it. So that's really the only differences with baby and adult ball pythons. Obviously there's a size difference as well, but that's kind of a given. Now, if we talk about gender, there's a little bit more differences with gender. Ball pythons generally are not aggressive snakes. And because of that, the gender doesn't really play a role in any type of emotional or hormonal displays. So you don't really ever see that. The only thing I can say is that male ball pythons are smaller than female ball pythons. And that also has to do with how much you feed it, because I've seen some I've seen some female ball pythons the same size as male ball pythons, because the male ball pythons were fed more than the female ball python. So it really has to do with how much you feed it, but usually males top off smaller than female ball pythons. The largest female ball python that I had, I think she was like 5 feet and maybe like 6 inches or something like that. So she was almost 6 feet long, and that's pretty big for a ball python. Where males, the biggest male that I have is probably like 3.5 feet, maybe 4 feet. And that's typically where they top off. So they do get a little bit smaller, and because they're not carrying all the weight for eggs, they're also a little bit slimmer. But again, that also has to do with how much you feed it, because you can have a fat ball python just like you can have anything else, any other pet that can be fat. So you can have a fat ball python. So you got to make sure you watch how much you feed it. Now, the one thing I want to add on this video has nothing to do with the differences or anything like that. The only thing I want to add is if you are getting a ball python, I recommend that you only get either a radiant heat panel or under the tank heaters. Do not get any heat bulbs. Do not get anything like that, because they absorb most of their heat from below. And while a radiant heat panel does kind of radiate from the top, it radiates in kind of around. So it's not really just in one spot. So it does make a big difference if you go radiant heat panel versus heat bulb. But the radiant heat panel is a little bit more expensive, actually a lot more expensive than if you were just to get it under the tank heater. As always, make sure you use a thermostat, because I have heard of some really terrible stories out there of people not using thermostats and their snakes getting burned or possibly killed. And also, to add on top of that, make sure that if you are feeding live, rodents, that you are maintaining supervision on these rodents, because they can fight back as well. So that's really the only differences that I know that I can say with ball pythons. I know this is not a very long video, but I feel like people do have questions like that. Every time I do a reptile expo, the questions are always the same. What's the differences between a male and a female? What's the differences between a baby and adult for every species that I sell? So, or every species that I own now, because I also have hog noses. So that's kind of how it goes for everywhere. So if you ever have any questions, here's one answer right here. I'm sure there's going to be other videos like this, but here's one. Hopefully it helps out to whoever has a question about the differences between baby and adult ball pythons and female and male ball pythons. And if you made it this far into the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything that I put out in the future. As always, peace.